we've done things like, for example, we've invested in a robot. Now, the robot does the testing for us.
Okay.
So it listens to the engineers, it gets the code from the engineers, it loads the code into the robot. The robot does terminal testing, and instead of 4 hours a day, then I've got to go home because my kid's sick, or I can't come in today because husband's had to take a leave and whatever, or I've got to go back to some part of the world on holidays. The robot was 24/7.
Welcome to the Unicorns Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Kelly. DataMesh is rebuilding the invisible plumbing of global payments so that every tap, swipe and online checkout is faster, smarter and more reliable for merchants and their customers. Mark Nagy is the founder and CEO of DataMesh, and he is my special guest on the program today. In this episode, Mark explains the hidden problems inside today's payment rails and why a simple tap is far more complex and fragile than most people realise. He shares how DataMesh is giving smaller merchants enterprise-grade tools, from real-time customer insights to support for everything from fuel and retail to digital services on a single platform. DataMesh lets retailers modernise payments without tearing out every legacy system on day one. The conversation also dives into DataMesh's global partnerships, expansion into Asia and beyond, and how the team competes with entrenched players in an increasingly crowded payments landscape. Finally, Mark reflects on building a revenue-generating SaaS business from Sydney, the role of AI in the next wave of payments innovation, and what it will take for Australia to produce more globally competitive technology companies. Mark Nagy, welcome back to the program.
Great to be back here with you, Justin.
DataMesh exists to solve some deeply embedded problems in the global payments ecosystem. So I'd like to start there. Mm-hmm. At a high level, what are those core issues in today's payments ecosystem that DataMesh was created to solve?
Well, I think the thesis of the company that was originally sort of put together in 2018 hasn't changed at all, and that is that most acquirers around the world are struggling to keep up with the demands of their customers and their customers' customers. Technology debt is a big issue. Banks and acquirers and payment processors have invested very heavily in technology to actually drive that. But the problem is a lot of those technologies were developed many, many years ago, and as we all know, technology is changing at a rapid rate. Consumer behaviour is certainly changing post-COVID. We're starting to see a lot more use of e-commerce and people buying things on mobiles. And of course, there's the big changes in domestic payment networks and alternative payment networks to your mainstream things like Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover and so on. All still very relevant, but you're starting to see individual things. And as a result of that, the organisations that process payments are struggling to keep up. So DataMesh's role is essentially to append to that core capability by adding functionality to the front of it. It's commonly called orchestration layers, and then we deliver that tech on behalf of the payments processors. So I think the super cool part about what we do is we don't compete with banks, unlike most other people in our industry. We made a fundamental decision that we want to partner with them. Not all of them like us, as you know. So that's okay. There's plenty of them out there to do like us. And of course, Asia's massive greenfields, and we've been quite successful this year in that market.
So for those that aren't deeply familiar with payments infrastructure, what are some of the key structural issues that sit behind a simple tap or transaction, and how unaware are most consumers of what actually is happening in the background when they pay for something?
It's an outstanding question, because I think one of the things that our industry has been so very good at is delivering an experience that people just accept or don't question. The reality of it is that on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the people who make, like Apple and Samsung and those guys that are making really incredibly complex and talented devices that are pushing more and more capability out to the consumer. And the bit that's really broken in this instance is that, electronic payments have only really been around for probably a bit over 40 years. And then they were very rudimentary in those days. But since the year 2000, it's really the technology timeline has compressed so quickly that the architecture that banks run is very dated. And as a result of that, they have dedicated platforms that do nothing but run payments, run anything associated with payments. I won't get into the weeds of that because it's quite boring, but nevertheless, it's the accounting side of it, and the money from one account to the other, and from one bank to another, and from one country to another. So those are all very complex systems that are deeply secure, and anyone tinkering with those is kind of they're compete almost being blasphemous in their behaviour.
Yes.
So what the problems that banks have is they all need to collaborate with each other. And the best way to do it today is through the networks like Visa and MasterCard. The issue is that, they've got armies of people running these things. The risk of bringing everything down, is far greater than the upgrade path. And as a result of that, they're stuck. So the consumer doesn't know, though. They're out there quietly
they have
buying
no
things.
idea.
No idea. They're online buying things. Australia's a great example of it, actually. We're probably the most successful country in the world. I mean, I think we talked about this last time we chatted, that probably the most successful country in the world when it comes to the interaction between a consumer and a merchant, either online or in store. And in fact, the marriage of those two together, contactless payments in Australia is so good. People tapping cards or tapping phones more recently. I don't think that's broken. So, but the banks certainly struggle to keep up with it.
Your platform, Mark, is often described as giving smaller retailers and merchants the same capabilities once reserved for major corporations. So can you walk us through a real-world example of how that actually plays out?
Yeah, so we know, like we all know, the great examples of the large retailers or organisations around the world that have invested very heavily in being independent. Examples in Australia being Coles and Woolworths, who have done an outstanding job of basically bringing in-house their payments ecosystem and architecture. That includes buying what this technology is called switching platform, where they actually can switch transactions to acquirers. But for anyone south of that kind of size of business, especially in countries like Australia, it's impossible because it's many, many millions of dollars in investment and a lot of people to actually run it, which means that you then as a merchant become dependent on your acquirer, which is another way of describing a bank. And so whatever the best that they can offer you is what you're going to get. And as a net result of that, the technology competition in terms of the experience delivery, which is really what this is all about, capturing the minds and hearts of the consumer and getting that interaction, because everyone loves that great experience. We all know you get to the airport, if it's a monster queue, that's not great. But, if you've got a priority line, that airline offers you happy days. So, banks are trying to do the same thing, because that equates to more financial transactions, which equates to more revenue. So the domain, to your question of the smaller guys, that's never been an option. The platform that we've created allows that to happen. So we literally have merchants that are 10 outlets that now have technology capability that only those big players would have had in the past, because they don't have to buy it, they don't have to invest in it, they don't have to run it, but they get all the toys that come with it. So it's pari passu with kind of where those big players are. That's now changed. So that's the super exciting part about it. Fundamentally, from a DataMesh perspective, though, it's not economically viable to go out and deliver directly to those organisations, and that means we have a distribution network where they actually do that on our behalf. Asia's a great example of it, where it is literally greenfields. The whole objective of central banks and acquirers up there is to move people off cash onto digital payments. Now, I'm not the conspiracy theorist about all of that side of it. It truly is about security and experience for the customer. You still can use cash.
So as far as you're willing to go, what customer insights are merchants now seeing that were previously not available to them, and how do those insights translate into potential real revenue outcomes?
Yeah, so look, I mean, there's a couple of answers to that. Some obviously I can't give you the names, but some real world examples are: we have a client who is in the hospitality space, who thought that their highest turnover business was based on repeat business.
Okay.
That's not the case. It was actually location and just sheer momentum and volume. In fact, it was single-digit percentage of return business.
Really?
Yeah. But because the store is performing so well, the optics of it are, I must be going great. Specifically, our role in that was to identify you should be trying to encourage the people that come once a month or once every 3 months to come back. You know, they're the guys you should be rewarding, not the 8% that come every week. So you're actually rewarding the wrong people, which fundamentally meant that they could then start to campaign to different audiences. Again, not really keen to get into statistical names of those participants, but what I can say is that information was currently blind to them in the past, and it all comes to the linkage of who the person is. We start with an anonymous version of it. Obviously, we're not allowed to.
Of course.
You're not allowed to capture people's data and so on unless they opt in. So it starts with that anonymous tokenized version of you see a card, you say, I've seen that card before. How many cards have I seen in a given period of time that is the same card? The Nevada thing of what we do without giving the secret source away is we actually create a token that links many cards together, so we can start to develop a persona of an individual. We don't know who they are, but the secret sauce for the merchant is if they can incentivize them to jump onto a rewards program by allowing that information to be shared, then all of a sudden we start to develop a better profile. So in the second example, we have a client that's done that, and what they've actually done is now at the point of sale, rather than say like in a convenience store where you've got a whole lot of items on the countertop and they go, you want a chocolate bar, do you want this, you know? They go, no, I don't. Well, I do, but I don't.
Do you want to become a member?
Yeah, I do it, I don't. I haven't got time for that. And quite frankly, a lot of those are high-speed environments anyway where people get cranky if they're in queues for too long. What our system does is go, when you were in here last time, you ordered a chocolate-flavoured milk and maybe a meat pie. You hadn't thought about that, but all of a sudden on the FPOS terminal pops up an offer exactly for that because it knows last time you were here. And so we're seeing a really big uptick in increase in the size of the basket. Because while at the point of sale, look, statistically the most looked at piece of glass in Australia every day, believe it or not, is not your TV or your computer screen, it's an FPOS terminal. Because you're standing there waiting for we call it FPOS terminals in Australia. Yeah. But you're actually standing there looking at that going, I'm waiting for the green tick or whatever it is.
Approved.
To pause that for a second, just for a second or two, and provide an offer or just a yes, no. And you don't want to be, do you want one of these? Do you want one of these? It's just really an offer. Oh, yeah, I will actually add that to the basket. So we're seeing that in one group. And then another one is using that moment to sign people up for rewards programs through QR codes and giving them an immediate offer. And then I could keep going on where, we talk about allowing suppliers to come straight to the terminal to do brand switching. Yes. So, you bought a Heineken, Peroni wants you to drink, and I'm making this up. Yep. They want you to try theirs. Next time you come back, not now, when you come back, if you bring the receipt, we'll give you some sort of reward for that. So that's the kind of thing. And then finally, it's product launches. So we're now giving a real-time perspective to some suppliers about how they're going on product launches. So to give you an example, if we've got a network of businesses and you've got a supplier trying to launch a new product in the business, typically what they then have to do is wait to the end of the day, all the data's correlated, they see how that product went. So, for example, a new kind of energy drink or something is being launched, and you need to launch it in a window because people drink that stuff a certain time of the day. Believe it or not, it's the early hours of the morning. And so you're launching that energy drink at that time. You want to be able, the nirvana again is to be able to real time watch it.
How are we going? How are we tracking?
Exactly right. 300-400 stores. How's that going? And then be able to see that data coming through live and go, quick, jump on the phone, ring this store. Something's gone wrong. Yes, we haven't put the displays out. The offer sign's not up. And so they're seeing real-time impacts. And that also comes back to, staff performance at the side, because you can see what staff are performing and not. So, it's super cool what we're doing. Now, I've got to be honest with you, this is a toolbox, so we don't do the do.
Yes.
Okay, we teach in our clients to use this information and then use these tools and they go from there.
So let's run through some of the partnerships that you've got. You're dealing with global heavyweights like Deutsche Bank, Visa, Viva Energy, among many others. So when you're sitting across the table from institutions of that scale, what's the pitch that gets them back to a relatively young Australian scale-up business that's pound for pound probably doing extremely well?
Yeah. So it starts with, and being brutally honest with you, it starts that we're in the deep end of the pool as a tiny little tadpole amongst a whole lot of whales.
Yes.
Okay. So it's often about execution risk, and I can't tell you we've always got it right because we haven't.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing things that have never been done before. So I'm very grateful for the patience that some of these organisations you've just mentioned and others show us, because we do from time to time stumble. But we're getting better every day. This has been a watershed year for us in terms of our technology reliability. I have a favourite saying that everyone loves to be first to go second, and so the truth.
I like that.
Yeah. So the truth that not like Buzz Aldrin, but the truth of it is that impression that you give out there that you've done it before, and you've done stuff before that hasn't been done before. Now, being Australian unfortunately doesn't work in our favour. I've actually had organisations say to me, "Do you guys build tech down there?" I thought, didn't know Australia had a technology.
It's all desert.
They obviously they know Atlassian and Canva and things like that, but for the most part we don't. Maybe buy now, pay later stuff. But so the answer again to your question, quite simply, is sitting across the table. First of all, is we have to establish our ability to be able to do the job. So we lean straight into piloting. Let's prove the concept, and because the agility of our system affords us the luxury of piloting. So most of these implementations are like, I have to do the whole lot in one go. It can either be a Thelma and Louise moment or it's going to be a huge success. There's nothing in the middle. Large organisations don't like risk, and small organisations like us bring lots of risk. We try not to, but that's the perception.
Yep.
And we've lost deals because of the perception of execution risk. So to get into an organisation like a Deutsche Bank and actually earn your stripes, and that is we talked about golf before. The thing that's a par 5.
Yeah.
That's going to take a while to get that that credibility. But once you're there, then the momentum creates. The flywheel effect kicks in. But it's really politely begging for an opportunity to have a shot and be able to show them, hey, look, pick a store, pick a location, pick a one device. We'll invest with you on it. If we earn our stripes, we want you to commit to us to go ahead. Our biggest play, though, the other one that wasn't mentioned in your list is Fiserv. And we're doing a lot of really good stuff with those guys. And, they're very heavily invested in the fuel industry like we are. And we're both together combined. It's very powerful. It's kind of the 1 and 1 equals 3 thing. So it's exciting.
Tell us more about that.
Well, Fiserv are, I guess, the world leaders in fuel payments processing. Mm-hmm. And I've heard numbers, I won't quote them, but it's more than 50% of the fuel industry in the developed world processes payments via them. And they're an alternative payment processor. They're not a bank, and so they've been extremely successful in delivering capability because they've worked very hard on the fuel card industry. They've worked very hard on alternative payment methods. You can just come to one organisation and get all the connectors you like. Where we come into play is that we add that sexy front end to it, that allows you to go from 3 or 4 terminals, which most people don't even think about, to one credit card terminal on the countertop. Sophisticated integrations, car wash, pay at pump, dog wash, mobile app. So dog wash is huge,
Yep.
But the money going into the pet industry. And so being able to consolidate that into one device is a very, very attractive proposition for merchants in the industry. And as a result of that partnership, and of course, like everything, Justin, it's about the people. We've dealt with organisations with, you wouldn't feed the people that run them politely, and then you get other organisations that are total rock stars.
Yep.
And I can't speak highly enough about the folks at Fiserv.
So some of these,
and same with Visa, by the way.
Yes,
Visa people are, we really enjoy that relationship. They're so accommodating and trusting, especially the team out of Singapore, who we're very, very close to. They're just really good people. They see they see the value of the partnership to all of the people. You know, they wear the customer hat, but they see that they can really be delivering exceptional things. You know, and these businesses have to evolve. You know, their evolution and their success will be dependent on how they change the future of what they deliver. And once upon a time, it was a drag-along thing. Sorry, I'm going on a bit.
No.
It was a drag-along. It was a drag-along effect, right, where essentially the industry would be kicking and screaming, dragged along. When I industry, I mean the payments industry, would be dragged along, and that was what created the whole genesis of the disruptors. You know, the big global disruptors like Adyen, you know, WorldPay, and those guys. You know, they have global payments. They evolved because banks couldn't do the job that business needed. You know, and so that banks are now making a conscientious decision: do I want to be in this industry, or do I want to outsource that part of it? When they outsource that part of it, they put their transaction banking volume at risk. That flow that comes through overnight, where the bank sits on that money and then basically pays out and distributes and settles. That's very, very complex, secure stuff, because, you know, you're managing other people's money. However, when you outsource the processing of that, you then vicariously outsource the ownership of it.
You mentioned Singapore, and I know DataMesh is currently active in more than a dozen Asian countries. What are the challenges, Mark, in scaling a payments platform across such diverse cultural, regulatory, technical environments? That can't be easy.
Yeah. Also an excellent question. I mean, I think that, again, is one of the things we've cracked. First of all, we've got a team of people that got good relationships in the region. I certainly, you know, it's my 36th year in this industry. You build a lot of relationships, not just here, but internationally in time. So that's the first thing, being able to credibly knock on people's doors and say, hey, I've got an idea. Secondly, the way our technology in our industry has been designed previously is on big bits of tin in data centres, which brings a whole lot of, you know, complexity, whereas we're all cloud native. So the ability to be able to deploy into a cloud-based environment, you know, whether it's Google, Amazon, Microsoft, we're cloud independent. That's advantageous to us. So New Zealand, for example, is all Microsoft. It's not really any of the other big players' major presence there. So the ability to say, sure, we can do Microsoft. So in the case of India, for example, you know, very complex market, highly regulated. The RBI is all over everything. You know, we've been able to get in there quickly. I think we support 80 different payment networks up there now.
Really?
Yeah, and you know, having someone like a big Deutsche Bank behind you to actually go, hey, we're doing this, that's not harmful. These are our guys, please work with them. But just generally, and then again, it's back to that, you know, anecdote I gave earlier of, you know, everyone's saying, well, you've done it there, you must be able to do it here. And so it is true, you know, a lot of organisations, and I have to say this is where Australians are really good, you know. There is a lot of, you know, please not offend my American friends, but, you know, Australians have been quite more successful at building relationships, I think, in this way in the region than maybe, say, the Europeans or the Americans have. And, you know, we have a very different way of doing things. We seem to be quite trusted up through Asia. You know, there's the political alignment, you know, currently at the moment anyway, doesn't seem to be offensive.
Yep.
And so
there are some big players in the payments space more broadly. It's pretty crowded. You've got Stripe, Square, Adyen, many others. So what then is DataMesh doing fundamentally different that has allowed you to carve out such a strong position?
Yeah, when we started DataMesh, this is actually one of the core tenets of why we had to. It's all very well to go and build what you think is the rockstar platform, but at the end of the day, you know, when you're fighting against execution risk, you know, who are you currently with? Not sure. I don't want to be your guinea pig. What's your proposition? We decided all of those guys you just named, by the way, compete with banks.
Yes.
Okay. So their proposition is, I'm going to come to you, Mr. Merchant. I'm going to give you a much better tech platform than he can or she can, and it's going to do all the things you need to do. But the difference is I need to be your acquirer. So I need to be the guy that processes your payment, and I'm the one who settles it. That means you're leaving him or making him portable, him being the bank. Our decision was, hang on, 90-odd% of the acquiring relationships around the world are owned by banks. We're actually going to go, we'll partner with the incumbent. Okay. Now, in order to partner with the incumbent, we have to then say, well, we're not going to compete with you. That flow, the revenue flow between the merchant and the merchant's customer and you, preserve that. That's yours. We don't
Let
want
it happen.
We don't want to clip that ticket.
Yep.
And I've got a whole other view on why that's also a disastrous proposition. But we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is license our platform to you, much like you'd license a copy of Windows, or you'd license a copy of Salesforce.
Yes.
Okay. We're not going to participate in the flow. So we become benign to you in that regard. And that's what I think has been one of our magical moments, is being able to do that, because we're seen as a partner to them, not a competitor.
And was that strategically planned, or
Yes.
it was?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I knew back in nearly 15 years ago that this is going to be the trick. To be able to say, look, let's have this quiet conversation in the room, Mr. Bank. You've got a really rusty, broken piece of kit, okay, and you're about to get carved up. I've got a solution for you that does two things. Gives you everything that the other guys have got, but I'm also going to be able to bolt it onto the front of your dusty old platform, so you don't have to bin it. You can choose to keep it, or you can choose to bin it.
So I was going to ask about that. Legacy systems
Can stay in situ.
Yes.
Us bolting onto the front of that. So think of it like, sorry for the car analogy.
Please.
I'm going to get the FJ Holden and put a Tesla body on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Now it's still an FJ Holden. Okay. But on the outside it looks like that. Then we can start adding the pieces, and then we replace the guts of it.
And has that strategy worked?
Yeah.
And what have you come up against? Going, surely that can't be that simple. It won't work. We've got to do it this way. It's not broken. Why try to fix it?
Yeah. So at a management level within organisations, they're up for it, because and we're getting very close to things that are maybe a little bit sensitive. But
Yes.
but if a bank decides to partner with us, we present them with an opportunity immediately to preserve their customers, and then actually go on the front foot and attack.
Yes.
Okay, actually go and attack their competitors or attack the disruptors. So we've got a number of banks now that have actually gone in and ripped the disruptors out, some of the names that we talked about earlier, and actually gone back to being the bank with the full stack. Okay, the challenges we face is that inevitably the folks that are in on the legacy side of the bank are going to not be needed anymore, if I could be polite. Because if the bank decides, or the acquirer decides, to move completely across to our platform, then they don't need that other thing. And sometimes there's hundreds of people run these other things, Justin. So you think about if you're going to grandfather that tech, okay, and you're going to move to a more agile cloud native solution, you don't need that army to run it. So not all of them do that, but again, that transition from sort of 20th century to 21st century, which is literally what's happening, that's what we present.
It flows in nicely to what I'd like to ask next, and that is AI. Where do you see it taking payments technology more broadly over the next couple of years?
Yeah. So we are doing some stuff I won't talk about today.
Okay,
Very
good. Watch this space.
Watch this space. We'll come back and do this, as I think we talked about earlier, probably in 3 or 4 months' time. What I can tell you about what we're doing with AI is that it is deeply embedded in our business. But unlike the kind of AI momentum that's out there at the moment, where people are virtually replacing their search engines for it and that sort of stuff, we've done things like, for example, we've invested in a robot. Now, the robot does the testing for us.
Okay.
So it listens to the engineers, it gets the code from the engineers, it loads the code into the robot. The robot does terminal testing, and instead of 4 hours a day, then I've got to go home because my kid's sick, or I can't come in today because husband's had to take a leave and whatever, or I've got to go back to some part of the world on holidays. The robot was 24/7.
Yes.
So and it is super accurate, including producing reports back to the engineers to say, this is where your code's wrong, please fix it. Now that's one implementation. That's all AI driven. Okay, so QA testing, that sort of stuff. Our engineering team run for code analysis. So in other words, hey, don't run off the reservation, come back here when they're coding. So there's that side of it. And I think what I can touch on a little bit on the future stuff that we're currently running at the moment is we're building self-healing platforms. So in other words...
Tell me more.
Yeah. So what I can tell you that we're just starting to test, we have 1.5 plus million different variations of what we do. It's hard to believe. When you put all the different versions of the software, different acquirers, all the different partners, all different POS connections, everything out through all the linkages in the back, you do the exponential. I was blown away when I saw the number.
Yeah.
If any one of those guys change something, code has to be written. So our AI engine that we've built listens to this code change and automatically rewrites the interface. No engineers required. Sorry for my engineers that are listening. but it's called self-healing. So, for example, if there's a point-of-sale system in store, you will be able to, the platform, if the POS vendor, say Microsoft, decides to update the point-of-sale platform, or Toshiba or someone, the system will hear and will notice the changes, rewrite the code for the interface so that the system can stay up and running, because that's our biggest pain. Every time, and see, our industry is so heavily regulated, when a standard or an update comes out, everything has to be changed, compliance and so on. So the ability to be able to have that automated is super cool. This will translate into when we drop a new platform in country, and we've got another 7 to do with Deutsche before we complete the program. It'll automatically configure itself and set itself up, and it'll automatically onboard customers and do all of that.
You've sort of teased us about potential for things to come up in 2026. You are balancing enterprise relationships, your fundraising, multi-market expansion, talk of a potential IPO down the track. Mm-hmm. What does your decision-making framework look like when you're trying to stay on top of that level of complexity?
Well, I'm actually only 35, but I look this way because of all of that. Like in all sincerity, it's tough. Yeah. Okay, and I think we said in one of the earlier questions, we're doing things that haven't been done before. The outside world wouldn't know that, and it's fairly boring, mundane space. But we're positioning ourselves to be globally relevant. And as a result of that global relevance, we have to now continue, because the customer profile we're changing, the pivot from selling direct to, I think over 70% of our pipeline currently is through our distribution network, which is what we'd planned. We had a little flatter year this year in terms of revenue growth, but that's because we've invested so heavily on building our distribution relationships like Visa, like Fiserv and that, which as a result of that, then we've got to wait for the flywheel to spin up to get those guys to get the momentum going, and we're seeing that coming through now. DataMesh needs to be part of something bigger. If you asked me 6 months ago or even 8 months ago, I would have said IPO's out of the question. And IPO may again be out of the question. What IPO does, pre-IPO does, it gets you match fit for a liquidity event of some description. And what I can tell you is, we've been working very hard on that. So by the time you would qualify to be IPO-able, there's such a word, you should be match fit for that. And that means ordered financials, all your accounts in order, processes, really functional board, all that kind of stuff. So when someone comes in and looks at it and goes, this is impressive. So I spend a lot of my time on that side of it as well, just making sure that the company has gone there. We've done some, we went out late 24 to do a fundraising round. We decided to pull it. We actually established a new high watermark in terms of valuation, and we took some money. But we thought, probably we've been on a fairly interesting cycle of capital raising over the years. Mm-hmm. And some people question why we've done that. And the reason being is we're only taking the money we need. Now, we don't care about the optics of it. I don't really give a hoot about that. People can say what they like. The truth of the matter is, though, that we've deliberately positioned ourselves so that take the minimum amount of money we can at the time, rather go out again, more hours away from home and do all that sort of palaver, and then essentially, but the big plan is to be early next year. We'll then contemplate whether that's the pathway we're going to go, or whether we trade sale or whatever. This is not a privately held company with just 2 or 3 shareholders. We've got some pretty significant shareholders that are in there. Now, they're not in there because they want me to give their kids a job. right? They're in there because they want to see return on investment, you know. And at our last funding round, you know, some people have 15 times their money. You know, so it's a pretty good place. Now, obviously, you've got to be able to liquidate it, but let me tell you, at the end of every shareholder update I give, they go, Mark, can you tell me what you're doing on, you know, our pathway to liquidity? So, you know, so it is our plan that, to answer your question, that somewhere in the next 15 months, there will be a liquidity event of some sort. And we, as we talked off camera, you know, we're fairly clear what that's going to look like.
Mark Nagy, founder and CEO of DataMesh. Always great to catch up with you.